Season 7, AI and Government. Episode 3, Can Democracy Survive Algorithmic Power? 1. Introduction, a new kind of power nobody voted for. Democracy was built for a world where power was visible. A law is proposed. A policy is announced. A leader makes a decision. A court issues a ruling. People can argue, protest, vote, and challenge authority. Algorithmic power works differently. It is quiet. It shapes decisions without public debate. It governs attention, access, and opportunity through systems most people never see. Eligibility scores. Risk rankings. Recommendation feeds. Automated enforcement. Predictive allocation. When power becomes automated, democracy faces a problem. How do you hold accountable a system that does not have a face? How do you vote against an algorithm? How do you protest a ranking formula? How do you appeal a model prediction? This episode asks a difficult question. Can democracy survive algorithmic power? Not in theory, but in practice. Because algorithmic power is not only a tool, it is an emerging form of governance. 2. What algorithmic power really is. Algorithmic power is the ability to shape human outcomes through automated systems. It is not only about AI intelligence. It is about control over information flows, decision systems, resource allocation, surveillance and enforcement, economic incentives. An algorithm decides what you see. That shapes what you believe. An algorithm decides your risk score. That shapes what you can access. An algorithm predicts where police should go. That shapes who gets watched. An algorithm decides who gets benefits. That shapes who survives hardship. The power is not in the machine's mind. The power is in the machine's placement inside institutions. When algorithms sit at choke points, they become governors of life. 3. Democracy depends on visibility. Democracy requires visibility. People must know what rules exist. They must know how decisions are made. They must know who is responsible. They must be able to challenge decisions. If power is hidden, democracy weakens. Algorithmic power is often hidden. Not always intentionally, but structurally. Systems are complex. Vendors claim trade secrets. Institutions use vague language like analytics and decision support. Even when systems are visible, they are hard to interpret. So algorithmic power creates a visibility crisis. Power acts without being seen. This is the first danger to democracy. 4. Democracy depends on accountability. Democracy is not only voting. It is accountability. If a government harms people, officials can be challenged. Courts can intervene. Elections can punish leaders. Public opinion can force change. Algorithmic systems blur accountability. When an algorithm denies a benefit, who is responsible? The agency? The vendor? The programmer? The data? The model? Institutions often say, the system decided. This is accountability laundering. Responsibility is passed into the machine. But machines cannot be morally responsible. So the risk is that algorithmic governance produces decisions without clear accountability. Democracy cannot survive long if power cannot be held responsible. 5. The shift from rights to scores. Democratic societies are built on the idea of rights. Equal protection. Due process. Presumption of innocence. Fair access to services. Algorithmic power pushes society towards scoring. Risk scores. eligibility scores, priority scores, suspicion scores, customer value scores. Scoring changes how institutions relate to people. Instead of treating people as citizens with rights, institutions treat people as data profiles with probabilities. Probabilities invite preemptive action. If someone is high risk, treat them differently now. But rights are not supposed to depend on predicted behavior. This shift matters because democracy depends on universal principles. Scoring creates conditional treatment. Conditional treatment is easier to justify than explicit discrimination. That makes it more dangerous. 6. Information control is a form of political power. Democracy depends on an informed public. If people cannot access reliable information, elections become weaker. Public debate becomes corrupted. Collective decision-making becomes unstable. AI systems control information through ranking, search results, recommendation feeds, trending systems, content moderation. These systems shape what people see, what people think is important, what narratives become dominant. Even when platforms claim neutrality, their algorithms reflect incentives, usually engagement and profit. If information flows are governed by private algorithms optimized for attention, democratic discourse becomes vulnerable. Not because people become stupid, but because the environment becomes manipulable. 7. Personalization fragments the public sphere. A democracy needs some shared reality. Not perfect agreement, but common reference points. Personalization breaks that. Different people see different news, different framings, different communities, different levels of outrage. This fragments the public sphere. People stop arguing about policy and start arguing about reality itself. Algorithmic personalization can intensify this because it optimizes for engagement. Engagement often correlates with emotion, so the system may amplify emotionally activating content. That increases polarization. A polarized society is easier to manipulate and harder to govern democratically. 8. Surveillance changes citizen behavior. Democracy requires freedom of assembly and speech, but surveillance can create chilling effects. If people believe their movements can be tracked, they may avoid protests. If people believe their online speech is monitored, they may self-censor. AI increases surveillance capacity, facial recognition, pattern analysis, social media monitoring, risk scoring. Even if these tools are justified as security, they can change behavior. People do not need to be arrested to be controlled. They only need to feel watched. A democracy where citizens self-censor is a democracy in decline, because fear replaces participation. 9. Automated enforcement expands state power quietly. Democratic societies often limit state power through scarcity. Police forces are limited. Investigators are limited. Courts are limited. Bureaucrats are limited. AI increases capacity. It can flag, sort, and prioritize at scale. This can be beneficial for efficiency, but it also expands enforcement. More audits, more flags, more watch lists, more predictive intervention. When capacity expands, the state can act more often. And if oversight does not expand equally, power becomes less constrained. Democracy survives when power is limited. Algorithmic capacity can quietly remove limits. 10. Private companies become shadow governors. A major democratic challenge is that algorithmic power is often held by private corporations. Platforms control information, Cloud providers host government services. Vendors supply decision systems. Data brokers supply profiles. Private actors may decide what content is visible, what speech is allowed, what accounts are restricted, what information is recommended. These are governance functions. But these companies are not elected. Their incentives are not public interest. Their accountability is limited. When private governance shapes public life, democracy is weakened. Because key decisions move outside democratic control. 11. The problem of trade secrets. Many algorithmic systems are protected as proprietary. This creates a conflict. Democracy requires transparency when systems affect rights. Corporations require secrecy to protect business advantage. When governments buy proprietary AI, public power becomes exercised through private black boxes. Citizens cannot inspect the logic that affects them. Courts may struggle. Journalists may struggle. Even lawmakers may struggle. This is algorithmic opacity as a structural threat. 12. The justice system, where democracy is most vulnerable. In criminal justice, algorithmic power can influence liberty. Risk scores for bail. Sentencing recommendations. Parole decisions. Predictive policing. This is a high-stakes area because rights are supposed to be strongest where punishment is involved. But algorithms can be used to justify preemptive control. High risk means harsher treatment. Even if the risk score is uncertain. Even if the data reflects biased policing history. This can create a system where some groups are trapped in cycles of surveillance and punishment. Democracy cannot survive if equal protection collapses in practice. 13. The welfare state, where I can turn help into policing. Democracies promise social support. But AI can turn support systems into enforcement systems. Fraud detection models. Eligibility scoring. Risk-based audits. These systems can treat recipients as suspects. The burden shifts onto the vulnerable to prove innocence. A democracy that treats poverty as suspicion undermines social trust. And social trust is crucial for democratic stability. Because democracy depends on people believing the system is fair enough to accept. If large groups feel targeted, legitimacy erodes. 14. The deeper threat, legitimacy through objectivity. Algorithms can create legitimacy illusions. A decision feels objective because it is numerical. A denial feels fair because it follows a score. A policing pattern feels rational because it is data-driven. This can reduce political debate. People stop questioning. They assume the system is correct. This is dangerous because democracy depends on contestation. Disagreement and debate are not failures. They are the mechanism of accountability. Algorithmic objectivity can silence debate by making decisions appear scientific. That is a new kind of authority. A statistical authority. 15. Why democracy still has a chance. This is not hopeless. Democracies have tools. Courts can require due process. Legislatures can restrict uses. Agencies can be forced to disclose systems. Civil society can audit and expose harms. Journalists can investigate. Workers can resist workplace surveillance. Citizens can demand transparency and rights. Democracy can survive if it adapts. The key is recognizing algorithmic power as political power, not just technical. Once it is treated as political, it becomes governable. 16. The conditions for survival. For democracies to survive algorithmic power, several conditions matter. 1. Transparency where rights are affected. Citizens must know when automated systems shape decisions. 2. Accountability structures. Institutions must be responsible, not the algorithm. 3. Rights to appeal and contest. People must have meaningful recourse. 4. Independent audits. Systems must be tested for bias, error, and harm. 5. Limits on surveillance and biometrics. Some capabilities are too dangerous to deploy broadly. 6. Public control over critical infrastructure. Information flows and decision systems that affect democracy cannot be left purely to private incentives. 7. Education and civic awareness. People must understand how systems influence them. Without these conditions, algorithmic governance becomes normalized, and democracy becomes hollow. 17. What happens if democracies fail to adapt? If democracies do not adapt, a predictable pattern emerges. More automated scoring. More invisible enforcement. More surveillance. More fragmentation of reality. More private governance. More inequality through predictive systems. Public trust declines. Participation declines. Polarization increases. In that environment, democracy weakens. Strong leaders promise order. Surveillance is justified as stability. Algorithmic tools support control. The transition is not dramatic. It is gradual. Democracy does not collapse. It erodes. And algorithmic power can accelerate erosion because it makes control efficient. Season 7, AI and Government. Episode 3, Can Democracy Survive Algorithmic Power? 18, The Central Question, WHO gets to design the environment. Democracy is not only about voting. It is about the environment citizens live in. If the environment is shaped by algorithms optimized for profit or control, citizens are nudged into certain behaviors. They see certain information. They face certain frictions. They are ranked in certain ways. This shapes political outcomes without direct coercion. So the central question becomes, who gets to design the environment? If private platforms design it, democracy is outsourced. If governments design it without oversight, democracy becomes surveillance-driven. If citizens can influence design through transparent governance, democracy can survive. 19. Core takeaway. Democracies can survive algorithmic power, but only if they treat algorithms as political infrastructure. Algorithmic power threatens democracy by hiding decision logic, weakening accountability, turning rights into scores, fragmenting shared reality, expanding surveillance, and shifting governance into private hands. Survival requires transparency, enforceable rights, limits on surveillance, independent auditing, and public control over critical decision systems. Democracy was built to constrain visible power. Now it must constrain invisible power. If this episode helped you understand whether democracies can survive algorithmic power, like this video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who thinks algorithms are only technical tools. And subscribe to Uncovering Facts for deep, hype-free explanations of technology, power,